right, everybody. Welcome back to the Dylan Gemelli Podcast. And I have literally my most exciting podcast to this date. She is a former UFC champion, a former Strikeforce champion, recently inducted into the International Hall of Fame, and just launched an absolutely amazing podcast, the Build Better Podcast. This, everybody.
Build for Growth.
Build for Growth. That's right. Build for Growth Podcast.
Hey, that is actually, though, that was a good name. I don't know why I didn't think of that one. Better. I was like, now I'm rethinking the name of the podcast, but Built for Growth. Yeah, Built for Growth, Built Better. It's the same thing.
I think it's because I listened to so much of it this morning on cardio that I just kept thinking about building better.
Well, yeah, now you're better for listening to the Built for Growth podcast.
This is Miesha Tate. Thank you so much for your time today. I can't tell you how appreciative that I am.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for people who are just listening now, I mean, I'm sure you'll get into it, but we met at the Olympia on the Monica Brandt podcast, and it was great. We had a great conversation, and then we just kind of like, and energies just aligned or whatever, I guess. And then you're like, oh, I'd love to have you in mine. I was like, that'd be great. And then we had a pre-call, and it was awesome. Like, energies just connected, and it was like, hey, we kind of think alike. And so I've been really looking forward to continuing conversation for your listeners.
Absolutely. And I was telling you, I'll tell everybody else, and this is how fate would have it. Because I was co-hosting with Monica at the Olympia, and I was speaking on panels at the Olympia, and we were going down the list and timing stuff out. And she said, well, I've got Miesha Tate at X time. And I was like looking at it going, oh, and I told my wife how bummed I was because I was not going to be able to be at that time. And I just said, you know what, screw it. I'm skipping this and making sure that I'm there for that. It's that much more important to me. And so here we are.
Let's go. Yeah. So I'm great, and I think the universe has a way of conspiring. I don't know if you've ever read The Alchemist, but have you ever read that book, The Alchemist?
I have. Yeah.
So, when things are meant to happen, they just are. And here we are doing the podcast, which, I mean, this is meant to be, it feels like.
Absolutely. So I have a lot of stuff to get into with you. I really want to dig into your podcast and things, but I know, like, with my audience, especially, they're going to want to hear about some of your career. And you told me some amazing things at the Olympia that I want people to hear about you, but your message in general, I think because it's so good on your podcast, but it all correlates to what you've gone through in your life. So I really want to get into all that because I think it's important for everybody to kind of see and hear such a story. So starting off, I really want to hear about what you went through as you were growing, through middle school, high school, and what drove you into becoming a fighter.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely a loaded question. So hold on. I'm going to tell you. I mean, I'll start with this. First of all, as a little girl growing up, it's not like I was getting into fist fights and this was a predictable career path for me. Like, oh, it made sense. Miesha went down fighting. She was always, a troublemaker or a troubled child. I really wouldn't describe my upbringing in that way. I was a tomboy, and I was, into playing a lot of sports. I think that boys like to do. I was always very athletic. I liked to climb trees. I still embrace my femininity along the way, though. I like to do my hair and wear skirts and, be feminine. So for me, this was just a normal blend of characteristics. But I came to find out later as I joined the wrestling team in high school, which was not for females, by the way. I was joining the all-male wrestling team along with my friend Sharon. But this was not a common thing for girls to be girly but also be strong and athletic, so it was kind of an anomaly for most people. And they really tried to get me to quit that first season that I went out. The boys just, I don't think that they were bad guys looking back on it. I just think they had the preconceived notion that most people had at that time, that this was not a sport for women. Women didn't belong, they couldn't hang, they couldn't do it, it was too tough. And so they just threw me in with the best wrestlers on the team, me having never wrestled a day in my life. And it was very clear to me, they just wanted to get me out of there. They, the strength and conditioning was brutal and it was so difficult. And I remember after my first practice being like, I loved I was not good at it, but I loved it. And I think I had this thought of law of diminishing return. I didn't know that that's what it was called at the time. I was just 15.
Mhm.
But I remember thinking, like, I'm going to get better at this if I keep showing up. Like, I'm so bad now. Like, I have to be able to get better fast. So I just got to show up and work really hard. And I did all 4 years. And then I ended up winning the coaches award my senior year, which is kind of given out to one athlete that embodies what it means to be a team player and a wrestler. And wow, because, going from a team that really just didn't want you there to being somebody who was recognized as a role model type example of what a wrestler embodies, and being a female and capturing that was, to this date, probably one of my biggest accomplishments. And it led me right into MMA. I went to college. I went to Central Washington University, and my friend Rosalia was like, "Hey, do you want to come out and check out this mixed martial arts club sport?" And I was like, "No way." I'm like, not a I don't do karate, first of all, because that's what I thought it was. I was so ignorant. And I was like, and I have zero desire to hit anybody in the face, much less get hit in the face. This just sounds terrible. Like, count me. I am not in. And she came back the next day and was like, "Miesha, you got to come and check it out. I know you'll love it. It's all these former high school wrestlers and college wrestlers, and you're going to love it." And I was like, "All right, fine." So I went, and on my very first day, I learned how to choke people. And I guess the rest is history.
That's amazing. I want to go back and ask a few things that we kind of got into a little bit at the Olympia. When you were in high school, do you feel like that the guys were giving you a hard time because they maybe felt threatened by you being on there, and, oh man, if I lose to her or whatever, I'm going to make an example out of her now and try to get you to quit so that didn't happen to them? Do you feel like maybe that was going on?
I honestly don't think that it was that was the thought, because I was so terrible. I mean, I had never wrestled a day in my life. Now, I could see that happening for females that maybe wrestled since they were little, like very young at that time. There were some lucky girls that had families that had older brothers. I didn't, or that came from a family lineage of wrestlers. And so they're like, all right, she can do it too. And they started wrestling since they were really young. And they were good by the time they got to high school. I could see that being an issue. But in my case, it was more like, she's a waste of damn time and space. Like, get her off of the mat. So I don't think I was a threat to anybody. Not at first, but I definitely, by my senior year, I remember there was this one kid, his name was Jacob, and he was a really good wrestler. And I remember getting in some battles with him my senior year, and him like losing his temper because I was not winning, but I was forcing him to work. And I don't think he even liked that. Like, I was really forcing him to, mind his P's and Q's, or I was going to get that reversal, or I was going to get, and I just remember him cross facing me so hard and just being like aggressive, mean, like really lost his temper, and just, almost to the point where I realized that I was getting into like a battle of physicality with somebody who was physically stronger than me, who was on the verge of like really trying to injure me. And I remember in that moment, I had to be like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to like back down, like relax. Like this isn't a match that I need to win. Like gym wars, you know what I mean? It was a gym war. And I was like, I don't have anything to prove here. Like, I hate to break it to you, but I don't have a penis. So like, like honestly, I don't know what's going on here, but whatever. And I just kind of like let that one go. But this happened like a few times, definitely. I think most of the team though really respected it, because I remember doing the conditioning rounds at the end of every practice. We'd have so much conditioning to do, and I would always be trying to outwork the guys in that realm. So we'd be running sprints, or we'd be running lines back and forth, and if they were not, I always had my sights set on the next closest guy. If they were not pushing their hardest, like I was going to beat them. And, I did. In those conditioning rounds, I beat a lot of them. So I made them work. I made the team work. I held them a little bit more accountable than they probably would have liked at certain times. But, they ended up embracing me and the brotherhood and everything really as time went on. And yeah, I'm just grateful for all of those experiences, to be honest.
Was there a moment, and maybe there wasn't, maybe this was just something that progressively came for you, but do you remember a specific moment where it was like they accepted you, or you did something, you maybe beat somebody or did a move or whatever, that you felt, okay, I feel like they're accepting me and that I belong here? Or did it just kind of happen over time?
I remember that there was a moment when there was a girl that came out on the team, and she was very cute. She was very cutesy. She had really, tiny, tight little shorts on, and, just not wrestler type wear. And she was, she was very flirtatious and cute and giggly. She really wasn't taking practice seriously and whatnot. And finally, a couple of the guys were like, Miesha, get rid of her. Like, get her out of here. And, it was, that was the moment that I felt like they looked at me different than they looked at any other female on the team. And I always thought it was funny. And although I always wanted other females to come out on the team desperately, I wanted more girls on the team, and I would try to recruit women all the time. I did want them to be there for the right reasons, And so I kind of just, wrestled hard with her, wrestled tough with her, just like the guys did with me. And, and yeah, I mean, she didn't last. It was obvious from the very beginning that she really wasn't there to wrestle.
Yes. Okay, cool. So what years was this? Because I believe at that time it was probably very rare for a female to be doing any sort of wrestling.
Oh yeah, no, I'm going to date myself. So I think I graduated high school in 05. So 01, I think the wrestling season starts before the beginning. Yeah, before the first of the year. So like 01 into 05.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, definitely not very.
No, actually my junior year, coming from Washington State, was the first year that women had a type of tournament. It was called a round robin. So it was just 4 wrestlers in a bracket. There was no eliminations or anything, but it was held at the state tournament. So all the men who had gone through regionals, divisionals, and placed and were wrestling at state, as females, it was very rare to see a female make it through the male division. And if so, it was usually the really small weight girls, because they have a more likelihood that they're wrestling for one, less experienced guys, because 103-pound guys usually are not seniors, and they also usually haven't gone through puberty. So there's a little bit of opportunity in those somewhat smaller weight classes, I think, for the females to be competitive for longer, generally speaking. But we actually got to wrestle during the break of the men's state tournament at the Tacoma Dome in a round robin. And I remember it was my junior year, and I was so excited. And I was, still wrestling, but wrestling with the better guys, because after like regionals and divisionals and those things, the team starts to get smaller. Basically, the guys that aren't still continuing on to state leave the team, and their season is over, so they're not really in the practice room. Anyways, I ended up breaking my ankle, or having my ankle broken, should I say. I didn't break it. So I didn't get to wrestle my junior year. Thankfully, I got a chance at redemption my senior year, in which I did win the tournament, which, it feels like you can say that you won state or whatever, but it's not quite as grand as what the guys are doing. But for the women at that time, that was, the Mount Everest, for us.
So the 2-part question, would you say that was your biggest accomplishment then throughout the whole process? And did you play any other sports, or was it just kind of wrestling that you stuck with?
I did cross country and track as well. So a lot of running sports. And my biggest accomplishment, I still would say, was the coach's award. It was because Because at that time I had not really set my sights on winning that much, because I mostly didn't win when I competed against guys. So the winning or not winning wasn't my primary focus. It was being the best that I could be. And I realized that I could change other people's perception of me if I just worked hard. I didn't segregate myself, and I showed up every day and treated myself as an equal. And that was such a valuable lesson to learn. I really think it's the reason why I got into the UFC, because I remember at one point Dana White was on any microphone that was asking him if women would ever be in the UFC. And he was like, no, very adamant. And I remember at that time thinking, but you haven't seen me fight yet. And I only had that kind of confidence because of wrestling. And I knew that if he ever got a chance to see me fight, that I had a really high chance of changing his mind, because I knew that I worked hard, and I knew that because I worked hard, I was talented, and I could win fights and I could make them exciting, which I believe were all the things that he was looking for to check the box. And, lo and behold, some years later, it's kind of exactly how it worked out.
I love that when somebody is willing and sure, very sure of themselves to bet on themselves and confident. And especially if somebody tells you no, or you can't do this or whatever, and then you know in your heart, I can do this. I'm going to show you I can do this. That's what separates somebody that's pretty good to being a star, in my view. So I love hearing that. Was there a moment or multiple moments where you thought, I don't want to do this anymore, like throughout the high school process part of it, not past that, or where you just would feel like giving up and not want to keep going on?
No, absolutely not. I loved every second of wrestling. It was the most difficult thing I had ever done in my young 15 years. And even by the time that I graduated, I lived my entire year waiting for wrestling season to come back around. I think had I known more, I probably would have tried to do some wrestling camps or things like that on the off season, but I didn't. I just didn't have that kind of family know-how or, support in that way, because we didn't come from that background. Choosing to wrestle as a girl was very odd, and my dad didn't like it at all. So I really wasn't going to get any extra support. So it wasn't something that I really was able to focus on the other 3/4 of the year. So I looked so forward to wrestling season every year. I would have done it year round without question had that been an opportunity for me, but it wasn't. And no, there was literally no point that I ever wanted to quit wrestling. I would never miss practices. I lived for it. It was the thing that made me feel alive.
That's a testament to what you became, because I'm certain, especially being that women didn't do that, and if you're given a hard time by others, that a lot of people would have crumbled, gave up, quit, or wanted to quit. And for you to say that, it says a lot. Now, this you touched on it, was my next question. What was because I would assume any father would be very worried or hesitant about their daughter. What was that like when you told them, your parents, hey, this is what I want to do? And how was your mom about it? What was the reaction? And did it change over time, or did it just kind of stay kind of hardened the whole time?
Well, my mom was the first person that I talked to about it. And I said, Mom, what do you think if I go out for wrestling? And she kind of paused and was like, you really want to do that? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I want to try. Can I? And she was like, well, I don't think you're going to like it. And I'm not going to tell you that you can't try it, though. So she said, go ahead. And my grandmother, my mom, kind of came from this headstrong, pro women in a healthy way. I'm not going to tell you that there's nothing you can't do if guys can do it. If they're doing it, then you should have the opportunity to do it too. So thankfully, it was something that my mom did not withhold me from, or I would be on a totally different path right now. I would never probably have found the UFC. I don't think I would even know my own strength, because nothing that I've ever done besides maybe birthing children, would test me in the ways that the world of sport has. And especially the way that hand-to-hand combat does with one other athlete, no team to rely on. I'm in that single moment of high pressure, injury prone, hand-to-hand combat provides. It's unlike anything else in the world. And for those reasons, I look at that and I'm so grateful that she didn't hold me back from that. And my dad, I don't remember when we told my dad, but it wasn't right away. That's for sure. So yeah, we were able to kind of keep that from him for a little bit. And, once he did find out, he was like, "You're letting her what? She's doing what with who?" And he wasn't very happy about it. He wasn't very stoked about it. But he also kind of threw his hands up in the air and was like, "There's nothing I can do about it," because like my mom said I could do it. He was kind of like, "Well, then whatever," but it wasn't something I didn't ever feel supported by my dad doing wrestling. Like he even came to some of my post wrestling meets, and maybe he showed up to a couple matches. But there was not really any excitement or support for what I was doing. And I do understand it, because now that I'm a mother, I can understand the inherent need for a parent to protect, and especially from a father to a daughter. That's got to be one of the most God-given instincts that there is for a father to protect daughter, for father to protect mother, for father to protect children in general, but I mean, especially his girls, Yeah. And I didn't realize how I was challenging that very notion at that time by going out and willingly putting myself at risk where he didn't really have any say.
And, it's every parent's protective, whether boy, girl, but you know how it is, like mom to son, dad to daughter. There's something different there, as opposed, and you're more protective. My stepdaughter basically is my daughter, and she started doing Muay Thai, and now they're doing the sparring and these little tournament things. And I've been on the phone with her like, "Listen, you need to be careful." And it's very controlled, pads, everything. Like, it's not anything near to the level of a fighter, but I don't like it either, and so I totally get it. Did that have any effect on you mentally? Like, did it bug you or bother you in any way or affect your performance?
I think it made me want to prove myself even more. If I'm being totally honest, I think I felt my dad's absence in all of that so heavily that I look back and realize I was sort of trying to become what I was missing. So I think, although I do not consider my dad to be a weak man, not by any sense of the mean. My dad's former military. He was a Green Beret, pretty militant man, really a man's man, He hunts, he fishes, like man's man. But he was, at the time, he was working for a moving company. So he was on the road a lot. And I didn't really see him a lot. And as I became a teenager, our relationship really became strained because we were from such different worlds. And I feel like I had grown up so much without him that I sort of took on the wanting to be the strong person for my mother, I guess. I almost like the oldest son, like when dad's gone, who's the man of the house? I think that I kind of adopted that responsibility unknowing, and I wanted to be strong and fearless and confident and provide in some way, although I didn't have a way to provide monetarily, but to protect my mom in ways, and my parents, they're still together, which is, it's incredible for anybody to be together that long, but, they went through really rough patches. Like, I think any relationship that makes it to the end. You can always look back and say like, man, there was times I didn't think we were going to make it. There were times I didn't think my parents were going to be able to pull through, and they did. But in those hard times, I saw my mom hurt a lot. I saw her suffer a lot. And I know that my dad did too, but men just deal with it so differently. That my dad dealt with it by leaving the house, by doing or not talking about it, just suppression. And my mother, I was kind of her confidant, so I was kind of that friend, and I was kind of that person she would come and talk to and pour her heart and soul out. And so we were really close. And I think that's what happens, when you don't feel connected to a strong male source in home, then there's a chance, that if you're someone like me, you might take on some of that responsibility in your own way. And so I think that's why I kind of lean towards those male-ish characteristics or attributes, if you will.
Yes. And everybody handles different kinds of negative things in their life differently. And some people crumble and some people use it. And I think that it says a lot about somebody when they're willing to take that head on and then use it to do something positive with it or to help elevate what they do. So, and that's what it takes to be a pro and to be super successful. And no matter what you do, you're going to go through things, and that's what kind of shapes you to become what you are. And so it sounds to me like you tackled everything head on up to that point, and I'm sure you do now, just to where we've talked. And to do that at a young age, I mean, you just don't see that very often at all. So,
well, I think I give a lot of credit to my mom. She raised me to be an independent thinker, to use my brain, to use my body, to not segregate myself, to know how capable I am. I remember being a little girl and telling people I want to be an astronaut. And most of the time their reaction was, maybe you get, oh, that's nice. But a lot of times, do you know how unrealistic that is? I just feel like, I was an 80s baby. So it was like, I did not, there was no coddling. There was no, let me be sensitive to your feelings. It was just like, I'm going to tell you that that's not realistic. And especially for a girl, I don't know if there had even been a female astronaut in space yet at that point. So my mother's reaction, though, regardless of what I would tell her, but would be like, Mom, I want to be an astronaut someday. And she without hesitation, you will. You will. If that's what you want, you will. And although I didn't become an astronaut, I still feel like I became a success. And it was because my mother instilled the confidence in me. She believed in me. So therefore, I knew that I could. Whatever it was, I could.
I know that everybody has differing opinions on this, and that's fine. I was an 80s baby too. I'm just a skosh older than you. And I feel like things have changed so much more where it's just kind of tell everybody what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. Oh, it's going to be okay. Oh, you this, and telling people things like that, they don't help at all. And we'll get into that later. Because you brought it up now, it's something I want to talk to you about later, but I feel like, and once again, everybody reacts differently to certain parenting styles and types, and there's no handbook on parenting, but that was so effective. And I used to think, man, because my mom was an English teacher and she was just brutal. Just even now, if I say something, if I don't put a comma in my text, I get shit, and it's like, but it's good because then I remember, and it keeps you even keeled and headed. And so I think it says a lot when there's parenting like that going on. It's not over the top, but very controlled. And it's just, you can see it. And when I talk to you, and I think that's one of the reasons you're very well spoken, polite, but have a strong belief system. And I can see that right away. And I love that. And I feel like, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that is probably the backbone of your success the entire way through.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom was really hard on me a lot of times too. She was the truth holder, so, but then I knew what she said she meant, I knew that there wasn't the sugarcoating. Now she was wrong about me liking wrestling, but she let me know, like, I don't think you're going to like it.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I'm not buying you wrestling shoes until I know you're going to do it for sure. So it was the first few weeks of, just wrestling barefoot basically. But yeah, it was, and I didn't grow up wealthy. Not even, I would say, close to that. It probably wasn't until closer to high school when my parents were becoming more financially secure. So, it was really rough in the beginning. It was tough.
Mhm.
Um, actually who I refer to as my dad, his name's Rob. He raised me since I was like 2.5, but actually biologically, um, he's not my father by blood. So
Okay.
the first 2.5, 3 years of my life, I was raised by my mother only. And we were so poor. We were so, so poor. And we had a house but it was given to us by my mom's mom, my grandmother.
Mhm.
That's the easier way to say it, isn't it? My grandmother. And, but it was not in great condition. Like the roof needed repair. Like the roof needed to be redone. And I remember that at points, like our power being turned off in the middle of the winter and
Ah,
us only really being able to heat one room in the back. I ate cereal every single day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it was so cold in our house that even the toilets at times were frozen over.
ah.
Uh, so, those formative years, but my mother's always been the kind of person that would go without to make sure that I had, you know, what I needed. There were times when school would be starting and my mother's shoes would be like falling off of her feet. And yet she would make sure that I had new shoes to go to school with.
Mhm.
Even though my shoes were still fine, her shoes, she really needed new, but she would make sure that I went to school with new shoes. So she always sacrificed so much to make sure. And, I'll never forget that. And I think because of those moments, I always felt like in debt to my mom. So whenever I saw my mom go through something hard or difficult or challenging, I wanted to save her from it. And when you have a lack of male presence in your life in whatever way that you interpret that, whether it's because, some dads are in prison, some dads are, gone, removed from the home in that way. Some dads are removed in the home because they're emotionally unavailable. Some dads are removed from the home because they're working so much. And by the time they get home, there's barely any time to spend together, much less, my dad didn't have great coping skills. He didn't have the best upbringing either. So when he would come home, it would be like kind of turn the TV on. I need to decompress. I'm exhausted. He didn't really have a lot of time and energy to invest in understanding this young woman that was growing up in his house. He'd never raised a girl before, much less other children. So, I think I felt a big disconnect there for a while. And that became sort of my backbone, if you will. I kind of took that and said, well, whatever you don't provide me, I will find in myself.
I love that. I love.
And it wasn't a conscious thought,
Mhm.
but it is how I look back on it and recognize the reason I became a fighter is because it is one of the strongest, most difficult, and masculine things that you can do.
Mhm.
Not
Awesome. I love that so much. Um, so as you got out of high school and started moving towards fighting, when did you realize when did it hit you like it not that you could do it, but like I can do this. I can really make this into something. I'm going to be a fighter. When did that hit you that this is what I'm going to do?
I think the moment that I was born as a fighter would be in round 2 of my very first fight. So remember when I was telling you that I had no interest in fighting anybody, and then I got talked into trying this MMA club sport, and I use air quotes. It was just a little class that was taught by students going to Central Washington University. I learned how to choke people, and I still was not interested in doing any striking. I got invited to a local fight card in Yakima, Washington, and I watched the fights, and I was just absolutely floored. I was taken back. I had never seen anything like it in my life. It was amateur fights. So mind you, amateur fights are highly entertaining, and they pour their whole heart and soul out there. So I remember having this feeling of being drawn to it like a moth to a flame and thinking, God, if they can do it, I can do it. You know, I've been through this in wrestling. Like, there were no female fighters on the card, by the way, but I was so inspired by the males. And so this little flame had kind of been lit. And then they made an announcement that if there were any females in the audience, there would be a fight card in 3 weeks that was for only females. And I was like, no way. There females do this? Okay, I'm going to make my way down. And I signed up right there. And then 3 weeks later, I had my first fight. And I ended up fighting this gal named Liz Posner, who owned a Muay Thai kickboxing gym with her husband, I think in BC, I think in Vancouver, British Columbia. So we were fighting round one. I take her down. She stands super tall and legs were available. And I was like, oh my God, that was so easy. And I was just taken back because I was used to wrestling these monster men. And I think I forgot to even throw a punch on the ground because I was so new. I literally never punched anybody. And round two came out. She caught me in a Muay Thai clinch, which if you don't know what it is, you kind of just take your hands, put them on as you're facing somebody on the back of their head. You clasp your hands together and then you bring your forearms in front of the collarbone. So you kind of have this tie around here on someone's head. And I did not know what this was. I couldn't have named it if you would have asked me. And I surely didn't know how to get out of it. So she begins firing knees right through the center. And one of them hits my nose, smashes it clean on. Another one's coming down the pipe. And at this point, I am just trying so hard to get through this so that I can take her down. So I'm driving in as hard as I can. We're up against the ropes because this is not in even a cage. It's in a boxing ring, which makes it harder to wrestle. But anyways, I slide down kind of towards her ankles. I think I'm kind of ankle diving at this point, which I'm actually grateful for because at least I'm out of the line of knees. And she kind of spins around and she gets on my back and I'm on my elbows and my knees and she's trying to get this choke in. And this is a very vivid moment for me still. It was a very defining moment for me because my nose was broken so badly that I was pouring blood, not dripping. I'm talking streamlining blood to the mat. And this pool of blood is getting bigger right in front of my eyes. I'm watching this puddle of blood grow. And, she's actively trying to finish the fight. So she's hitting me in the ears. She's trying to choke me out. And I remember the only time in my career I've ever lost my temper was in that moment. And usually it doesn't serve you well, but fortunately for me in this moment, that was when the fighter was born, right? I was like, I am here to get revenge. And I started rodeo kind of bucking her and I kind of hula hooped her down in front of me. So now she's in the guard position. I stood up on my tiptoes and I was just raining down punches with everything that I had. And there was tons of blood everywhere. And round two ended. And I went back to my corner and my coaches were silent. They didn't know what to say. There was no reaction. They were just like, what in the hell are we supposed to do with this? Like, don't know what to do. And I think they kind of panicked and they just threw in the towel. They didn't like talk to me about it. It was just like, yeah, you're done. Like I think they didn't have the heart to send me back out for round 3. And I think that was because I was a female. And again, not bad guys, but I think that the innate protective instinct kicked in. They kind of maybe looked at me like little sis and it was their job to save me. And that was the only thing that they could do. They couldn't go in and fight the fight for me. So they took me out of it. And it was such a bummer because I remember seeing her face and her relief drop to her knees. Like the sigh of relief was permeable in the whole freaking stadium. And I was just like, ah, I was so frustrated because I really I had figured out what I was there to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds funny to enter a fight and not know what you're there to do. But honestly, I don't think I had figured that out yet in round one. It wasn't until I had sustained serious damage and then gotten through it that I finally realized what a fight was like and how to channel the inner fighter. So that was really the birthing place of my fight career.
Well, I don't care who you are. Everybody has a moment where everything just clicks. You might be good at something or do something, but there's a moment for everybody where things just click. And so that's why I was super curious as to what yours were. And now, now I see that's awesome. It's an amazing story that you drew. I'm sure that anybody watching that's going to be like, drawn in. So from there, what happens next for you? Like, do you think, okay, I want to do this? Do you keep going to like these? Because I want to ask you this too. And I never told you this when we were talking because we got into so many things. So my roommate, I think it was like 2003 or 4, was a fighter. And so I went to so many local fights, and they're the best to go watch and see. It's totally different. And it's so like hardcore in there and everything. So I've been around fighters. I started watching UFC. My dad brought it home because I was watching WWF my whole childhood in high school. And then UFC came out. So it was like Hoist Gracie, Ken Shamrock, that.
Yeah.
I watched UFC 1 with my dad. And so I got into it and I started watching Pride fights. And so I watched it evolve. But, when you're talking like when you got out of high school and everything, fighting was really getting like, okay, now it's getting popular and everything. So what was next for you after that? Because that was a time where it was just going crazy.
Yeah. So the next progression, ironically enough, was me first dealing with the aftermath of not only losing a fight, but sustaining really bad damage. You got to remember, I was a broke college kid. This was insanity to everyone that was around me. Why would you be going to college and do something like this for absolutely no money, damage your face, risk your brain cells? It made no sense to anybody but me. Didn't even make sense to my mom. My mom highly discouraged it. She didn't like the fact that I was doing it. And I think everybody had this idea that, well, thank God she learned her lesson. Thank God it wasn't worse. Now she realizes this is a bad idea and we can be done with it. Mm-hmm. And that was the last thing that I was thinking. I was thinking, I just didn't prepare right. I didn't know anything about fighting. I watched some fights. I dove right in. 3 weeks of training, and there were things I didn't know. It's not that I couldn't have won that fight. I just didn't prepare for it. And anything you want to do well, you have to prepare for. So I remember my face looked like something like a raccoon lion hybrid. So I had 2 giant black eyes and my nose was wide and flat and I was extremely swollen. And yeah, I really didn't have a leg to stand on or argue with people looking like when I'm in that condition. But I know what I was thinking. I was thinking, I'm going to go back and I'm going to start training and I'm going to do this better. And at that time, that didn't mean that I was thinking I was going to have a career in this at all. I thought, one step at a time. I just want to do better than that. Right. I just want to like win a fight, and I want to prepare for it correctly, be challenged, and see what I actually can do with proper preparation. So that's what I did. But then another fight turned into another fight, and pretty soon I had won 6 amateur fights, and I was getting a call to turn pro. And I think that the second moment that I knew that this was going to be something more serious was when I got a call from Strikeforce to come down to San Jose, where they were based out of, and fight Elena Maxwell. Her nickname was Beef, Elena Beef Maxwell. But so I fight at 135 pounds, bantamweight. She fought at 145 pounds. So the call was to fight her up a weight class. And she's a 2-time K1 kickboxing world champion. I'm just, some wrestler out of Washington who's a bit smaller that probably should be easy pickings for the hometown girl, right? Mm-hmm. So I go down there and I win this fight.
Wow.
And they then offered me a multi-fight contract. And that was the turning point of my career when I said, oh my gosh, I'm actually guaranteed 3 fights a year. And if I keep winning, I make more money. Mm-hmm. And mind you, when I say more, this was like pennies on the dollar. I think that my fight with Elena Maxwell was like $1,500 to show and $1,500 to win. So, but when you're not making any money, that was a good chunk of money, and I was already in a passion pursuit. At that point, I had given up the luxuries of life. I didn't have an apartment. I went in on a 22-foot RV with 2 other fighters, and we bought this, put it on Dennis Hallman's property, and lived there for a year and a half, 2 years. So really had sacrificed everything just to be able to train. So at Dennis Hallman's, he had basically a glorified gym with padded walls, and it was called Victory Athletics. So every day there was pro practice, and we would train and we would spar and we would fight and we would learn. And when I got that contract that said, hey, you'll be able to fight guaranteed 3 times a year, I said, man, like, this is the dream. Like, I didn't know what I was working for exactly because there wasn't a clear path for women. Remember, women were not fighting in the UFC. Strikeforce was a huge deal because it was actually televised. It was the Challenger series. I'm trying to remember what it was on. It was HD net at first, and then I think it moved up to a little bit more of a visible channel. And then Gina Carano, shortly after that, ended up fighting Cyborg, which was the biggest selling event in Strikeforce history at that point. So it outdid all of the fighters previously, which were all male, and it opened the door. I said, wow, like, this is the direction I want to go. And, Gina really inspired me. She really was somebody who carried herself with a lot of couth and a lot of likability. She always seemed a very real, honest, genuine person. Hell of a fighter. She had so much spirit. And so she opened the door for the rest of us. And I was right there. Like, as soon as I got my contract, I was like, that's what I want to do. That's who I want to be like. That's what I'm aspiring to. And then it wasn't long after that, of course, Dana White started getting the question, when are women going to be in the UFC? Never. It's like, I'll never let women in the UFC. But it was my fight with Ronda that actually changed his mind. So, back to that thought that I had some years before that, it ended up coming true. And I really feel like I manifested that. I didn't know Dana was going to be watching that fight, but I just poured my heart and soul into it. And granted, I didn't come away with a win. It was a win for women in the sport of MMA. Even though it was a loss on my shoulders, I still was able to deliver in a powerful way and had this rivalry with Ronda and give her a good run for her money where, to show that there was competitiveness, there was skill, there was heart, there was determination. There was everything that you would want out of a fight. Even me refusing to tap and letting my arm just completely be annihilated, dislocated. I just refused. She got me in an arm bar and she snapped it and I wouldn't tap. So, people were like, oh my God, like, how is she so tough? Like, how are women so tough? Like, they had no idea that we had this in us, I think. And so it was pretty big news at the time. And when Dana saw it, I don't know, like, I think it was within a week, he called me, gave me a big bonus and said, women are coming to the UFC. And I said, holy shit. Because he wasn't my boss at that time.
Right.
He wasn't, and there was some rumors about Strikeforce being absorbed by the UFC. We didn't know what that meant for fighters, and especially for females, because all we had ever heard at that point was women will never fight in the UFC. So we were like, dang, we're pretty SOL. And I did know that before going into the fight with Ronda, that the future of us may be dependent on that. But I didn't know if Dana would care. Like, I don't know. I didn't know if he would be watching. But I thought, well, here's the chance. Here's the opportunity to prove everything I've been saying. And I know that it can be done because I've done it before. And learning that lesson as a 15-year-old girl moving through high school, that anybody's perception can be changed. Just need an opportunity. So there it was. And I took it. And a loss, I walked away with so much more victory and the victory mindset than I think I could have even if I had won the fight. Like, honestly, looking back on it now, I learned so much more from those losses. They elevated me in every single way, and especially when it comes to being humble and understanding how hard it is to lose shit that matters to you. I worked so hard for that. I put all my eggs in one basket, and it felt like my life was ruined. So I empathize with people who maybe have gone through bankruptcy or who have, gone to jail or lost their job or this or that. It's like, and I just know what feeling like hitting rock bottom is, no matter how hard you've been working for something. I know and just to lose at life in those moments that really matter and they feel like it's the end all be all. And then to be able to still move through that and find some light at the end of the tunnel. And that wasn't the only big hiccup or roadblock, but it was one of the ones that shaped me in such a big way that I will always be grateful and carry that sense of gratitude for the opportunity to be shaped in that moment.
That was top to bottom, very inspiring. What I want to point out to people from everything that you just said, because you said it twice, and I really want to make this something that people listen to. So I'm going to bring it up again. When you said that you lost, but you won, because in everything that we do, when you take an L on the surface, if you have the right attitude and you learn from that and use that to figure out a way that you actually won, and then let that fuel you to move forward, that's when you start actually making progress. If you just keep win, you never really win in totality because you never learn how to really grow from that. And when you have the attitude after something bad happens and you let you grow and you never actually lose, that's how you not only help yourself, but inspire others. And what you just said, I've had the whole world in my hands in my 20s. And when I tell you I lost everything, I lost everything, freedom, everything. And I had to start from scratch, like pure scratch. So I know what you're talking about. And when I can put a message out and somebody like you, where it will resonate with everybody, I want to spotlight that in a major way. So thank you, not just for me, but for everybody, and allowing me to help put out your message to try to inspire people that no matter what happens, there's always a way to use that and to learn from it. And there's a reason why those things happen. So I thank you for giving that story and putting that verbiage in there, because it's a huge, huge deal what you said.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you highlighting that. And I think I kind of I glossed over it and really didn't realize that is such a driving point. That is such an impactful part. And that's not to say that when you lose things that matter to you, that you just wake up the next day happy as ever. No, I was crushed. I was devastated. Felt like my whole life had been ruined. And I know that that's like, oh, how can that be? It was just a fight. It was just it. But it was everything to me because it was such an uphill battle to get there. And then I had this huge rivalry and I felt like I was meant to win that fight. Mm-hmm. But now I realize I wasn't. And I had to be okay with that because I gained so much more about life experience and life knowledge and empathy. Empathy is such a powerful tool to have and to be able to lean on, to be able to be empathetic towards other people and understand what it feels like to just take hard losses.
Mm-hmm.
And I grieved, I mourned, I was sad, I cried, and I was so frustrated because I had lost my world title. And I thought that maybe I had lost every opportunity to really become something, and go to the UFC. And I just didn't know. And I remember that week was really, really tough. I felt, you feel like you let down a lot of people around you too, because people start to invest in you. They start to care, your trainers, your training partners, your gym, your mom, your dad, they're flying there, they're coming to support you. And when you lose, sometimes that's the hardest thing to face, not just the loss, but the feeling of losing for everybody else. It's just manifests and it becomes so heavy and suffocating. And so in that moment, I was so broken. I was sad. I cried. But I got through it. And I guess I do want to drive that point home too. That it doesn't mean that the process is easy. It doesn't mean it feels good to lose things. It doesn't mean that it's going to feel like it's good or right or going to be good in the end. It doesn't. It feels like shit. And you're going to feel like shit. And you're going to feel terrible. And you're going to feel like nothing will ever be right again. And you're going to feel like it's hopeless. And you can maybe even question whether you can get through it or you still belong here or your worth or your value. You do. And it will. So you just have to have faith. Faith is believing in something without having proof.
Yep. Thank you.
You have to have faith that you will come out better for it on the other side. And sometimes that's all that you have because you don't have proof. You don't know for sure. But it starts with making that decision, whether you're going to have faith, whether you're going to choose yourself, whether you're going to believe in yourself. And I think back to my mom's voice every time. You can. Like you will. You can and you will. And that's really something she instilled in me young. And I think I've always carried that thought, even in my darkest moments, even in the most challenging moments when I questioned my worth, I questioned my validity, I questioned my value, I questioned my reason for life. I questioned all of it. And at points, I really thought that maybe my life wasn't worth living anymore. I had really tied my identity to my value as a fighter. And when I lost, I really felt like I was nothing but a loser. I had nothing to contribute. And I realize now it was short-sighted, but I had to get through those losses and move through that. But each one was just like this devastating blow that I didn't know exactly how to move through. And it's just remembering that you can and you will.
I love it. And, everybody likes a comeback story and anybody can win well, but not everybody can handle a loss well. And I've seen a lot of people, in team sports or in singles, types of sports, boxing, fighting, they'll be undefeated. One loss will break them in half. And others will use that and they will remember it and learn about it, what they can take from it and move forward. I always say that the best teachers oftentimes have made the most mistakes because they learn from it. And that's the key, is using that. And then also remembering that, like, if they're in your position or somebody that's, revered, watched, you're also inspiring others. And so taking that secondarily on, it should also fuel you, because you should think even if you inspire one person, it's a big win, because people need that.
Yeah.
And so people that are in more of a spotlight or in front of people should remember that. And I don't think sometimes any of us know the types of effects that we have on people. So I love everything that you're saying. Now, what was it like for you when you won the title? I know what you went through losing it and how it affected you. What was it like when you won the title? And then after you lost it and went to UFC, was it in your head like, I'm getting that title back? Like, I'm going to do whatever I got to do to get that title back. Was that your mindset?
Yes, it really was. And again, I was still so consumed by my worth was, tied to a single outcome. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a common mentality for athletes, but I think this also extends to fathers, mothers, whatever. Like, I think men, because I've talked to enough men, and I want to praise men for a second here, because I think that it's so difficult this day and age, maybe more difficult than many years prior, to be a man, like to be masculine, because masculinity gets a bad rap. Masculinity can be used for good, it can be used for bad. If you have a masculine, confident, strong, capable man and he steals your purse because of it, well, then yeah, it's bad. But if he stops someone stealing your purse, then it's great. So masculinity is not inherently a bad characteristic. It depends how it's used.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that men have had to go through a lack of support as of recent, and if even if there is support, it's a lot of times the wrong way. Like, I don't think men want to be pitied. I don't think that men want, their wives or women to come to them and be like, do you want to talk about your feelings? Like, that's not exactly how it works. Like, they want you to pump them up to where like they'll run through a wall for you, because that is what, like, men are the backbone of our society. And I fucking love masculinity. I love a strong man. And I love it when they're also in touch with their feelings, but I realize that men and women are just different in that aspect. And so, I try to learn that, and I try to respect it and move through it. But, for me, it's been a learning curve for all of it. Even when I've tapped into my masculine side and my feminine side, and I kind of lost sight of parts of me or my feminine, or I try to drive it out so that I could be strong for my fights and compartmentalize. And then it just led me to like not understanding a lot of it. And I guess again, moving through that, your question was like, getting the title. So I got the title in Strikeforce against Marlis Kunin, and I lost it to Ronda. But I got that call from Dana about a week, 2 weeks later, got some money in my pocket and was like, hey, we're going to have a job in the UFC. Whew, okay, so I'll be all right. I'll get through this. Get in the UFC. I work my way back. I coach on the Ultimate Fighter against Ronda Rousey, Tough 18. And I fight her for a second time. She's the champ in the UFC right now. And God, I want so badly to get this one back. And not just because of the redemption part of like, oh, this person I lost to. Like, there are people that I have lost to before that I didn't care to win as much as I did against Ronda. Part of it was the rivalry, but part of it too was because she was so like mean to people that couldn't fight back. It was one of my biggest points of contention with her. On the Ultimate Fighter, she just treated people bad, people that she knew that she could treat that way, producers, editors, interview, the people working behind the scenes, and I always hated it. So I wanted to win for those people, and I lost again. I never beat Ronda, right? I fought her 2 times, and I lost both times.
Mm-hmm.
And that was compounding difficulty to move through that. But then, I fought, I think it was 5 or 6 more fights after her. I won all of them. I became the number 1 contender again, and there was supposed to be this rematch again with Ronda. But they ended up giving it to Holly Holm. Even after they had promised it to me, they gave it to Holly Holm. And I remember being so upset about it. And then Holly Holm kicked Ronda's head into like outer space, knocked her out. It was like the head kick heard around the world, right? And I was like, okay, well, now I want to fight Holly, So then I got the opportunity to fight Holly, and it all came around. I ended up winning my world title there in Strikeforce, in the UFC. Moving past Strikeforce, I won my world title in the UFC, and it all made sense. Because the first time I lost to Ronda, the second time I lost to Ronda, it didn't seem to make sense. And then it all came back around, and it made sense. And it was just, I had to have that mindset of, I can and I will. I will get through this, and I will find success in this.
I remember because I mean, we watched everything, every pay-per-view, always had them. And I remember when she lost, it was like when I was a kid, because at that time, it just didn't seem like she was ever going to lose. And I remember wanting you to beat her so bad back then, and somebody to beat her. And it was like the Mike Tyson Buster Douglas fight when I was a kid, where it was like, it was at the point where it's like, shit, nobody's going to beat her. And then when she just got the shit beat out of her in that fight, because she did, I was like, wow. So then when you got that opportunity to fight Holly, I didn't know what was going to happen, and so it was because I watched it. I still remember watching it. It was awesome. What did that feel like when you won that title? And so I'm a big guy on when you reach a goal, it should only make you hungry for more. Of course, celebrate it, cheer it, but where do you go from there as a champion? What drives you after that to work harder, to hold that? Anybody can win anything, but consistency, it's kind of like what I struggle with clients with diet. You can lose weight and meet your goal, but then it's the consistency is the hard part. So where did you go from there? What made you go, okay, now I got to defend this and hold on to this as long as I can?
Well, of course, it felt amazing. It was in that moment. I was so emotional because I had been working what felt like, forever. It felt like my whole life's worth of work that night finally came together, and then it all made sense. And everything, in that moment was great. But if I'm being completely honest with you, I was still a very broken person on the inside. And I had pushed a lot of things away. I had not dealt with a lot of things that were in my life that were holding me down, bringing me down, whether it was past traumas or things I was currently going through that had become skeletons in the closet. That was like adding another brick every day to the load that I was carrying. And eventually one of the bricks just flattened me. I think the craziest part about winning the world title was that for a few weeks, I was on top of the world, like nothing could bring me down. And then after that, I realized it fixed absolutely nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. It fixed nothing. It was a Band-Aid that looked great and was probably decorated and cute and looked wonderful, but underneath the wound was nowhere near healed. And it wasn't until I fought 2 more times, I lost both of those fights after that, and I walked away from the sport of MMA. I retired. I left a extremely toxic relationship that I had been in for 9 years, and I had allowed myself to become isolated from family, from friends, and I had told myself that the more difficult it is, the better I'll be, the better I'll do. It was in spite of. I convinced myself that I needed this adversity to be a great fighter because I had always had it. So I thought that it was necessary. And it wasn't until I really went on a sort of spiritual healing journey to fix the relationships that I didn't have anymore, rekindle the things that were important to me, and reconnect with God. That was a big part for me was, I was always a believer, but I didn't really have a deep connection. And I think in that moment when I lost that second fight and, my world was spinning out of control, I didn't know which way was up, which way was down. I'd always describe it like being in this really dark room. It's pitch black and there is just a pinhole of light. And this is like the moments when you're considering whether your life is still worth living, contemplating taking my own life. And there's a pinhole of light. And I can either stay until the room's completely dark and I'm gone, or I can run to that light. And so I ran to the light, even though I didn't know where it was going to take me. And, that's symbolic of, of starting the healing journey, the healing trajectory, dealing with the things that I had not dealt with, getting rid of the things in my life that weren't serving me or moving me in the right direction, realizing that I'm not just Miesha Tate, the fighter, finding who I am beyond that, and really, soul searching. And, I'm not somebody who, pushes religion on people. I think that your relationship with with God or Jesus doesn't need to happen in a church. Like, the people are the church. You don't have to go to church, but I do say, if anybody's like still listening to the message here, I'm not trying to push anything on you. I don't have anything to gain from this. But if you feel like you're missing something in life, I believe that there's power in a relationship with God. And I will just leave it there. I feel like there is freedom in that. And it set me free in a way, because just like the song, Jesus Take the Wheel, I can kind of like, hey, it's all good. Like, when one door closes in my face, I know, like, I'm so good. Like, I know who I am at the end of the day. I'm a God-fearing woman. Like, that's who I am. And you could take everything else away from me in life, but you can never take that away. And so to have something that is so constant, and I mean, you could take my house away. You could take my title away. Someday I won't be a fighter anymore. Right? Someday I'll be retired, and like, I won't be able to say, oh, I am a fighter. I'll say I was a fighter. Right? God forbid I could lose my husband. I could lose my children. The title mother could be taken from me. I hate to even think about that. But I'm talking about like those, we really have to look at the things we take for granted. People lose their children and they're no longer fathers and mothers, right? People lose their significant others. They're no longer husbands and wives. People lose their homes. Look at the natural disasters that happen in North Carolina, and Ashford, that these homes they're not even there. They're gone. They're not even, these people are losing loved ones, lives, homes, livestock, lifestyle, everything. Those things can be taken away right now. 10 seconds from now is not guaranteed. Mm-hmm. We think it's going to come. 10 seconds from now is going to come, but it's not guaranteed. All those things can be taken. But the thing that can never be taken from me is my faith in God. And so that gives me the security to know that whatever there is to face, He's got my back. Like, I can and I will. And I will do it from a place that's so much more secure now. Like, I'm not reactive to people anymore. Like, people, you can't hurt my feelings. Go ahead, try, Dylan. Call my kids ugly. You ain't gonna hurt my feelings. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, I think my kids are great. That's fine. Maybe you think my kids aren't the cutest thing in the world, but I do. Like, I have my peace because of my foundation with God. And yeah, peace is everything, right? It's the thing that can't be taken from you. So with all that being said, I try never to take any of those things for granted, but it's much easier said when I know that I'm secure and I know exactly who I am. And I know that no matter which direction life takes me, I'll be fine. I'll figure it out. If the metaphorical home burns down, I have the tools to build it again. Like, I just stay calm, go find some wood, go find some nails and build my house again. Like, that metaphorical home in life will be torn down many, many, many times. But every time you have the balls and gumption to build it again, you'll build it back better than it was before, right? Each time you reinvent that, you build that house, it will be better and nicer. You'll be like, actually, I didn't really like the way the kitchen was anyways. Like, I'm going to build it better. I know what I want in this new home, So that's just how I look at life. Every time the wrecking ball comes in and wipes everything out from underneath me, it's like, okay, there's an opportunity to build it back better than it was before. Like, I'm good.
I'm going to share something with you then, since we got all into that direction, because this is also something you and I didn't get to talk about. So, and that's why you saw me smiling the entire time you start talking about this. I've been raised Catholic my whole life, and I've always prayed, and but not to the point of where you could say it's a proper relationship with God. You think it is,
right? Until
you realize it's not. And I'll tell you just briefly, because this is not about me. This is me sharing this with you. For so long, things kept getting better for me, and I accumulate more things. I've got a beautiful wife. I've got us finally into a beautiful home after all the struggles. I've got a sweet car and all of this stuff, people complimenting that I never had before. Most of the time I was having people just hit piece me online. And finally, I've got all this going on, and I just would go to bed at night and I'm just not happy. Why? What is missing? I'd lay down, I'd have anxiety. I wouldn't ever go to bed happy. And it doesn't make sense. when I figured out and I started to put God first every night, every morning, first thing I do, thank you. First thing I do when I wake up, I spend an hour either in the Bible or reading books. You'll see, if you ever see, like I'll put something in my morning every day to try to help people, give them a word, something small, because, hey, like you said, I'm not going to push this on you either, but I'm certainly going to show you. And I think that the more people that show, it might just catch on with somebody, who knows. And it, like, once again, if you get one person that you're helping, because that's in the Bible, that's what you're supposed to attempt to do. And he says, if you go into a town and they don't like it, shake the dust off and move on, but at least try. And I think that if we try and get people back on that, or at least understanding, because there's these preconceived things that people misinterpret, they read, they don't understand metaphor, they read things literally and don't, like, I have Bibles here that break down. I will read a section and I will go down and then get the actual translation of what it means, highlight it, go back to it. I have them all tabbed out, everything. And I think that if we get more people to just not push it, you don't push things on people, but at least give some sort of indication on what they're missing. When that clicks and you find that, everything opens up and changes. You stop being a slave to things or opinions or all of this bullshit that you can't take with you when you go. The only thing you can really take with you is your relationship with God. And once you figure that out, of course I want nice shit. Who doesn't? Who doesn't want comfort? But it doesn't mean anything if you don't have that first. It just doesn't mean anything. It's worthless. And you understand that when you don't feel it, Yeah. So
no, and you said it so well, and I'm glad that you shared that, because I think people live in a world where it's so propagandized. I say that's a long word. Where things matter. Like, oh, what are you working for? So you can have a nicer home, so you can have a nicer car, so you can have this, so you can have that. Why? It's like, well, so they can have more of your money. It's like, wait, so you and I'm not trying to put anybody down. Of course, I want to, be able to have a home and, have a car and these things or whatever. But all I'm saying though, is like, you have to put that on a balancing scale and realize that that shit doesn't really mean very much. Like, I don't wear name brand clothes anymore. Like, unless it's like a gift or anything like that. Like, I don't buy the shit because I'm like, it's just clothes. Like, I don't care. Like, I know that people who are celebrity status are supposed to do that. Well, they do that so that they can make people think that they're better than you, but they're not better than you.
Mm-hmm.
They're just people. Like, they put their pants on in the morning, one leg at a time, just like we do. Like, gravity applies the same to them. Like, it's all the same. Nobody's cooler than anybody. It is, and that's also one of the things that's cool about having a relationship with God, is it's just a great equalizer. I don't care. Black, white, Asian, gay, married, divorced, like sinner, this, that. Like, we're all children of God. We all make sins. We all fuck up. So who am I to judge? Like, you've been through some shit. I've been through some shit. Cool. Like, what can we learn from each other? Like, I'm here to help you. You're here to help me. Awesome. We're like, there's nothing that makes you better than me. There's nothing that makes me better than you. And it has nothing to do with the amount of shit we can buy or the nicest things that we can drive. That just is what tells me that, it's like, well, you've bought into like what other people think is important. And again, I'm not poo-pooing anybody for having a nice home or having a nice car or anything. Those things are nice, but doesn't mean anything in comparison, in my humble opinion, of having your peace and your freedom. That is priceless. There's no amount of money in the world that can give you that, can give you a good night of sleep. Doesn't happen. And I see a lot of, athletes, celebrities, these people, and my heart breaks when I see them commit suicide, when I see them take their lives, because I have at least a small understanding of what it's like to taste that life of having everything and still feeling like, why am I still sad? Like, I just made $1 million on this fight with Amanda, technically, and I made that, and I've got this beautiful belt, and this and that, like, I've got a house. Like, shouldn't I be happy? Like, wait, that's what my whole life, that's what TV's telling me, that's what the messaging is. Like, you want all these things because these things are great. No, they're temporary dopamine hits, and they don't mean shit at the end of the day. Because if you don't know who you are, if you don't have your peace, if you don't have your freedom, you will not be happy. Plenty of billionaires out there who are not happy. They have all the money in the world, not a care in the world, otherwise could pay for whatever they want. They don't have their peace. They haven't figured it out yet. So I think it's great if you can have both.
Yeah.
Some nice things and have your peace and your freedom. But I think it's hard to do if you don't have that kind of faith foundation. I think it's difficult to do. I don't know if it's possible. I find that most people, I think, who are the happiest have a genuine, authentic relationship with God. But either way, like if you're missing something, like what do you have to lose? I'm not saying go to church. I'm not saying start tithing. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about, like, say a prayer, see how it feels, see how it sits with you, see if you can give some faith to divine intervention and take some pressure off yourself. That's all.
It couldn't be more true. I started to even, and I'll tell you, because I was thoroughly upset when I had to tell you, I can't record this week. I got COVID right when I got home from the biggest weekend in my life. I've been working the past 15 years and finally got recognized on a certain scale for the work I've been doing. And then I meet people like you, and I got this going on, and I have to cancel. And I'm going, why? But instead this time, because I've been praying for more trust, because everything's great, it's great. But when something's bad, I don't get mad at God, but I start to do this, like, woe is me type of deal.
Oh, you mean you start to become human, right? Like, we all do this. We all do this. Totally normal.
Yes, but this time I said, you know what? For once, it's not about me. Every single gift I've got was given to me for a reason. It can be taken away just as quickly as it was given, right? But why? Why? And you know what? I figured it out this morning. Because this whole week, instead of me pouting, bitching, whining, complaining to my wife, I'm never going to get better, that type of shit that I say, I can't work out, I'm miserable. You know what I did? I sat here and figured out that, one, that I have been like biohacking my entire life the past 15 years, didn't understand that terminology because of the thing, the area I'm involved in technically. Reading, I can't tell you how many people just this past week, because like you said, everybody's human. I don't look at people's followers, who they are, whatever. I don't give a shit. I will at least attempt to speak like they're just like me or just like anybody else. And I've studied and read and learned so many things about me, what I'm doing wrong, and how I can help people this past week. And it made me realize, man, you've been on the wrong path, like with things you're doing, but there was a reason why, and it all culminated to this. And so I figured that out this morning. Like, this is why I got sick, and this is why, because I needed to take a step back after the Olympia weekend. And because you get on such a high when something happens, and you just kind of, and it grounded me, and it gave me the time to sit, and there was the reason why. And people need to figure out there's always a reason why. Everything that you get was given. You didn't, maybe you earned it, but it was given to you, and it can just as quickly be taken away.
Yeah, we have to figure that out, the why. And we have to remember to have the gratitude even when it doesn't seem to make sense. Because I remember you really wanted to do this last week, and I was ready and I was excited, but you were like, man, I'm so congested. I think you said you gave yourself a bloody nose, even trying to like clear your nose and sinuses. But like, what a gift was it to have another week to even prepare for this conversation? You know what I mean? Like, you were able to like go through and you listened to some of my podcasts, and I really appreciate that I've seen your comments on my Instagram and just like being so supportive. And that is something we wouldn't have had we rushed the process and had that, that done the call that week. And so this conversation, I think, took a whole level of depth that we wouldn't have had if we didn't have an extra week to kind of formulate the kinship and, getting to know each other and the depth and, what you're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, and combining our messaging. So I think the product turns out better for it. You feel better. You look good. You're not all congested. Like, we're good. Like, you're good. Take your hands off the wheel. Jesus has got it, man.
That's right. That's right. And just anybody listening, if you get sick, don't blow your nose too hard, because I, like when you said you broke your nose, that's what it looked like the blood coming out. So just don't do that. Like my wife panicked in there, and it's like every time I blew my nose after that, she was on me. So we're gonna record again, because I want to get all into your podcast, and I want to talk about issues I saw you talking about that I am so passionate about. And when I saw that you were passionate about it, I was like, oh my gosh, like we got a million.
We have to do a part 2, and it'll be better then, because there will be more stuff that we're going to talk about, because I have some really good episodes that are coming out soon that I know that you'll be really interested in. Actually just recorded an episode with Brian Sanders. His Instagram is Food Lies. So that one's not out yet. I'm not sure when it will be, but that's just a little sneak peek, I guess, for your listeners. But he's awesome, man. It's so cool talking about the evolution of humans and how we came to eat meat and how we changed throughout our evolution when we started eating meat. Man, that was fascinating. When we became using tools, and the way that we were able to prioritize hunting at that point, and then how our brains grew, like went from these small kind of like ape-like brains to bam, human brains, was directly correlated with the time that our meat consumption went up, which I think is really fascinating. And again, I'm not trying to put down any vegans or vegetarians or anything like that. I do believe that we were meant to eat meat. I think it's more bioavailable and better. But regardless, it was so interesting looking at the science behind that. So, I mean, there's a lot of really cool conversations that I've had on the podcast. If you're interested in it, it's Built for Growth. I think you can listen to it pretty much anywhere. You got on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever the heck you listen to your podcast. And, what I'm really trying to do there, Dylan, which we talked about on Monica Brand's show, was I'm trying to truth seek. I'm trying to decipher the world and bring it to light to people in the most transparent way to help them in their journey. I want informed and transformed. That's what I'm looking for. I want people to be able to make informed decisions. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I have good intentions. And I think intention is 90% of it, if not more. I always base my judgment of character is like, well, what was their intention? What did they mean to do? Like what were they trying to do? What was their intention? Was it meant to be good, or was it meant to be bad? Just because something goes wrong doesn't mean that somebody meant for it to. It's like you got to take that all into account. So anyways, my intention with this is just genuinely to help people. I think that I have been given and provided so many gifts in my life, and I think about how 2024 in America looks way different than 2024 for women, especially in Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Palestine, Israel. A lot of these places. So I got to do something with it. I can't squander it.
No.
I've got to talk to people. I've got to try to figure out the truth. And I can't sit here and say I'll never make a mistake or, do it perfect. I'm not going to do it perfect. But each week, every Thursday, I will do my damnedest to help me learn and you learn and give you the best tools to help you grow in life, in the decisions that you're going to make, whether it's, anything from nutrition to avoiding toxins to mentality. I have personalities and experts, and it's just such a passion project of mine because I've been thinking for quite some time, what am I going to do when I retire? Like, what is my calling? I'm not just going to do nothing. So what do I want to do? I can tell you right now, it's like, I just want to make a difference. I want to know someday that when I'm laying on my deathbed that I helped people, because so many people helped me along the way. It just feels like the right thing to do. And I want to do the right thing for no other reason than it's the right thing to do. That's it. There's no other reason. You're not going to buy me out. Like I'm not going to sell out. You can't steal my peace. Take everything, take my money, take my car, take my house. You know what I mean? Like, I worked hard for all this stuff. I'm proud of it, sure. But that's not what I'm chasing. They don't care if I have a bigger house. I don't have the nicest house. Like, I don't live in $1 million mansion. I live pretty simple. My car is dirty most of the time. Like, what can I say? You get in my car, you probably sit on a cheese stick that my kids left in there and some popcorn. Like, I'm just a normal person because I don't care. Like, and like, I don't know. I pick people up from the airport. I'm like, hey guys, it is what it is. It's where you get the real Miesha Tate. Sorry. Like, I don't know. I live my life. I'm not obsessed with being perfect or trying to present to you that I'm perfect. Like, you're gonna know exactly who I am, and I'm not gonna apologize for it. Like, I'm a mom. I don't pay people to clean my house. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But first of all, it wouldn't make sense for me because my kids will destroy it again within like 30 minutes of being home. So it doesn't even make sense to have somebody else clean my house. But regardless, I have to live in an imperfect environment because, that's just how I want it to be. I don't want to overstress these things. Like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. I got my kids, got my family. I got God in my life. I got my freedom. I got my peace. Boom. We're good. Happy.
I think that the best characteristic that one can have is being themselves at all times and not conforming to what they think that others want, saying what people want to hear as opposed to what they need to hear, and giving the true who you are, no matter what. And it's take it or leave it. If you don't like what you get, cool, because not everybody's for everybody. I get it, and that's fine. But when you don't put out who you are, you can only hide that shit for so long. It's always going to come out at some point, and you're going to be in a position. I won't name names, but we see it constantly right now going up to the election. It happens every day with a certain someone, and you can't hide it because you can't hide forever. And having that trait about you, it may have some people not like you, but more people are going to respect you than not. And far too many people don't live that way. And trust me when I tell you, there's a lot of people that don't say anything, that keep that shit to themselves, but they watch and respect the people. If you go, because I'm a big analytics guy, right? I see what people watch, attention spans. I'm a numbers guy. So I see who people really watch. And the people that get all the views and all the watch are generally the people doing what you're doing, where they're speaking truth. They're looking for truth. They're not conspiracy theorists. They're not nuts. They're looking at the real shit and they're delivering that. And here's an example. Yesterday, this is how crazy things are too. When I was looking through your podcast sheet yesterday, my wife showed me a video because I'm a nutritionist and I'm so dedicated to nutrition, but I don't know everything. And I'm very hard on myself. And she was showing me a thing on salt and how it's demonized and this, and this. And I go to, and I, you know what, you're right. I know that. You have a thing talking to a doctor right on your list. And that's one of the topics there. But that's it. Is there's so many things like cholesterol that they demonize, certain things about the sun. It's everything because it's putting money in their pockets to put you on shit that you don't need. Right. And so these are the topics. What you're doing and what I'm aiming to do now is to talk to people that are experts in these areas, learn from them and give it to the audience. Right.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing here. That's what people need, and I don't give a shit if somebody doesn't like it or makes a comment or whatever. If we're waking up in the morning worrying about somebody typing us a comment from mom's basement, we got our own issues. Right. Yeah. So
you can't steal my peace. You can't steal my peace. I just lead those things with empathy. People ask me now, like, how do you, when I talk to, teenage groups or high schools or, kids that are growing up in a social media world, my heart goes out to them because I know how challenging it is to have that constant influx from people that you don't know, telling you things you shouldn't have to hear from these people. Mm-hmm. And my piece of advice is to lead with empathy. It ain't about you. If that person is leaving a comment that's negative, if they are hating on you and you haven't done something out and out wrong, it was just like a terrible thing, like it's just maybe a picture of you and they're just like, you look fat or something, right? It's nothing to do with you. It has to do with how that person is perceiving living and living their life. Like they're not happy. Like they're if somebody's a troll, like I'm like, oh my God, I feel so sorry for you. That must suck, man. Like you haven't found your peace yet. Like you haven't found, you're searching for it. You don't know how to be happy. Like if what I'm doing is hurting your feelings, like I mean, I don't know what to say. Like I'm sorry. Like I'll say a prayer for you. That's the best thing I can do, I guess, but you're not going to steal my peace. Go
No.
ahead. I mean, if you want, it doesn't serve any purpose because it's not going to affect me. But what are you living with? Like, how's your day going? The person that's like leaving that comment, I think about that. And I'm sometimes like, man, how's your day going? Like, you all right? Like, and I actually mean it like sincerely, because I think sometimes these people are reaching out negatively because it's almost like they're blowing off a little steam. It's like, it's almost like a little cry for help in this little way, like these people are, yeah, I mean, healthy, normal, quote unquote people don't really, they're not doing that. So anyways, I just lead with empathy and it saves me a lot of pain. I don't care what you say online about me. I don't care. I really can say that is only because I've truly found my peace in all of this. So yeah, say whatever you want. It's all good.
I mean, if like in my free time, because it's rare, and when I have that free time, that's time I'm either working on myself, I'm spending time with my wife, I'm reading, I'm either praying, reading something religious or reading something, like right now I'm studying stem cells quite in depth, and things like that are going to be beneficial to help others, to grow. And if you are spending your free time doing that, then clearly something's missing. Like actually not something, there's a lot missing. God first,
So, just remember that, like, it doesn't have anything to do with you. Like they're not happy. That's it. Like you can feel sorry for them. And that's probably the best thing to do is like realize it's not about you and they're sad. They have a worse life than you do probably if they're trying to bring you down with a comment, so yeah, that's it. Lead with empathy.
My hope is that with you and I talking about this and showing like that's not anything at all, because look, like I modeled for many years. I saw a lot of girls cry. I walked into auditions. I was in Europe. I saw like some messed up shit being said, and it's like, hey, that's the eyes of whatever, it means nothing. And now I see it more on social media where, somebody younger does a video or like a teenager or a kid and people will attack them and it's hard to deal with. And my hope is you and I talking about this and letting people realize like, that'll help them, because we found our peace, but I would like to help other people find theirs in it too, because I know a lot of people struggle with it and that stuff can linger on people. So to understand that means jack shit in the, totality of life. I just want people to hear that message because, like we said, it doesn't mean anything. So,
yeah. So I hope, that we probably drove it home. People are like, okay, we got it, but it's an important part, and I do hope that people hear what we're saying, and I think there's definitely so much more that we could talk about because I know there's like half of it we didn't even get into, but I really am happy to have this conversation with you. And I feel like it was hopefully powerful. Hopefully it resonates with some people. I think that it will, so we just got to keep trying to spread the word, find the truth, be transparent. That's it.
So I will say, and we'll talk about this for sure, but just for people watching in our part 2, I want to get more into your podcast and I want to talk about some different topics like health related, diet related. And then like when you were talking about, I've done several things on toxic masculinity, but that was a year ago and things have changed again. And that's some stuff I'd like to talk about. So we have a lot of topics for people that are watching that I would definitely like to get into, that I'm sure we'll get into. And so for you, what are the best ways for people to follow, to watch what you're doing, to, get involved, to spread the word, to share your stuff? Where can they follow you at? And what's your best way of contact?
Oh, thank you for that, Dylan. I would say the first place that, listen to the podcast if you get a chance, just one more time, it's Built for Growth. You can find it anywhere on any podcast platform. But the other way is on my website. It's MieshaTate.com. That's MIE. And on there, if you go on there, it'll have a little pop-up and you can subscribe. You get 10% off. I think that's for doing that. But if you subscribe, I will not bombard you. Okay. So every 2 weeks, you'll get a newsletter and I write them myself, and something that I'm so proud of because it takes me the better part of 2 weeks to complete that. Now I do have a team that puts it into an email format and does the hyperlinks, because all that shit's above my pay grade. But I write it. Like, I take the picture myself. I write the important message that was my takeaway. And like what we've talked about, when you're like, oh, I figured it out this week. Like, I have those aha moments that I feel like so blessed with. I'm like, I got to share this with people. And I love to be able to do that and put it in a newsletter. And I'm also certified as a change psychology. So I'm a behavior change coach. I don't coach people one-on-one, but in that newsletter, you will get some of that coaching at no cost. So I'm going to help you with your goal setting techniques, with motivation, with mindset, with changing the things that you want, like growing in the direction that you want. It's not just passive change. You can just let life happen to you. My coach, Robert Follis, who passed away, I lost him to suicide. And he was such a big part of this motivation for me to start this podcast, because as a mentor and as a friend, it's like a brother to me. I miss him so much, but he left such a purpose in my life. And one of his favorite quotes, my favorite quotes of his, was that change is inevitable. Growth is not. So it starts with a choice. You will change from today to tomorrow to next month, regardless, because life is going to happen. And you can let it passively take you wherever you want. You could let your fitness goals be passive. You can let your diet be passive. You can let your income be passive. You can let your future be passive. Life's going to happen. Or you can make a choice to steer the ship a little bit. Not too tight, right? We still got to maintain a little balance in all of that. But we can have a lot more say if we just decide what we want out of each moment and start with the important moments. Mindfulness. How do we practice these things? How do we actually get actionable about this stuff? Because people say all the time, oh, don't take this for granted, or don't, how do we do that? Where do we start? That's what I love diving into with people. How can I help you start this change? I'm just going to tell you, I'm not just going to be like your parent, don't do that or do this. No, I'm going to walk you through how I got to the place where I'm at, small, little, tiny steps, how to get mindful, how to get present, how to be actionable, how to set goals, how to keep that, momentum going. So those are the things that I'm really working on in this newsletter. Those are the things I'm talking about in the podcast. And, the guests that I'm bringing on, I'm just trying to bring on the best people that I think can help you. These people, you talked about salt, the salt myth, right? So I have one of my first podcasts is the anti-salt rhetoric and debunking that. Salt and electrolytes is so important for people, and it's super important for athletes. And I still can't believe there are athletes out there who cut weight and don't understand the importance of electrolytes and the balance of that in their system. But I had Dr. James DeNicolantonio on there, and he is such a wealth of knowledge in all aspects of nutrition, but we focused mostly on salt and electrolytes for this one. And he spent his whole life researching this stuff, and it gets to go right in your ears for free. How cool, right? You normally have to go to a doctor who receives maybe 0.1% of their education about nutrition, because that's just not how MDs are. I don't know if you guys knew that, but they're not taught about nutrition, functional, foundational building blocks of life, muscle, brain, bone. They don't know anything about that unless they independently study. So anyways, I'm finding these doctors and experts who are going beyond, who do care about getting the right information out to people and trying to get it to you for free so that you can make your own decision. Don't just take my word for it. I'm not a saint. I'm not perfect. I'm sure I'll mess up along the way. But here's some food for thought. Please take this information and go think for yourself. Decide if this will work for you.
I love it. That is, I could literally keep going on all night long, but I know you have to go. I want to thank you so much. I knew this was going to be good. I didn't know, and I had a high expectation, but it really exceeded everything for me personally, and I'm sure for everybody watching. So I really want to thank you, because time is always precious, And like you said, we never know how much we have. So any that can be spared, I want you to know from me, it is just thoroughly appreciated.
Absolutely. No, Dylan, we had a great pre-call before this, and I knew that this was going to be a great podcast. So I appreciate the platform, the opportunity, all of it. Like, I'm not taking it for granted. And I'm also excited for part 2 and just to see what else comes from this. You know, it's The Alchemist. It's the book at work. I feel like, you know, that kind of like you put the energy out and that's what you get back.
Yes, this will be multi-part if you'll do it, because I have so much to say and offer with you together that the message is so clear and abundant. And this is going to help me personally on top of everybody else. So thank you. I am looking forward to it, and we will definitely talk soon. So everybody, Dylan Gemelli, Miesha Tate, thanks for watching the Dylan Gemelli Podcast, and we will see you soon. Signing off.